Greg, thank you so much for your time this morning. Can you just paint us a picture of exactly what you witnessed as you were in the Ukraine and at the Ukraine within that Polish border?
Yeah, I was supposed to be in Ukraine last week, but unfortunately Mr. Putin had different ideas. So I only made it as far as the border. But, what I saw was very quickly between Thursday and Sunday this past week, the numbers of refugees steadily mounting up. So you saw from a trickle, perhaps in the first day, something around about 50,000 people, to very quickly, as you pointed out on day 10, over 1 million people. And that, of course, doesn't account for the number of internally displaced people. So what's essentially happened in Ukraine is the country has been sort of divided in half by the Russian attacks from south to north and north to south. And not that they have joined up yet, but they've essentially sort of created a fissure along the Dnieper River. And it means that many of the people in the western areas or from Kiev, for instance, are now fleeing westwards towards the Polish border. And of course, that's the traditional fault line of Ukraine in many respects. The western part has tended to be Catholic and of course, once large chunks of it were under Polish rule, and the eastern part has tended to be more Russian-speaking, more Orthodox in religious orientation, and that has been one of the reasons that Mr. Putin has done what he has done.
Yeah. Talk to us a little bit about the humanitarian needs, right? As you're saying that more and more people are trying to flee the Ukraine in search for some kind of solitude or safety for that matter. But what are the needs on the ground at this moment?
Well, I mean, the UN is, of course, best placed to speak more directly to those needs. I mean, there's been a tremendous outpouring of support. I mean, I saw for myself how the Poles, who of course themselves only 80 years ago know the costs and consequences of war, but perhaps more graphically than any other nation in Europe, how they were very generous in what they had come up with immediately. And there was already a sense of organization marshaled by the Polish security services, but civilians coming in and providing food, dropping off food out the back of their cars, pre-cooked meals, all sorts of things happening. Of course, that's really gone up to scale as the situation has changed. And now you have millions as opposed to hundreds of thousands, or as I saw, tens of thousands coming through. So you need things on a scale. And it's like birthday presents. What do you most easily give? Well, you give money because it goes with everything. And often people give clothes, or often people give food because that's what's most easily available. But ultimately, large amounts of money are going to be required to address this. And places of sanctuary. So these folk, these million people who are now in sort of Western Europe, as it were, they're going to have to be found accommodation. They're going to have to be found jobs. Their kids are going to have to be put in schools. And of course, one of the most, I think, disconcerting aspects about this is just the number of women and children, because all the men of a fighting age between 18 and 60 have been asked to stay behind in Ukraine. Some say forced to stay behind in Ukraine to conduct the war. So it's primarily the refugees are women and children. So, their families, which have almost immediately been split asunder by this conflict, which is going to create other stresses and strains going forward.
Yeah. Greg, what do we understand about South African citizens that are trying to flee the Ukraine? I know we've had extensive conversations when it comes to students and just ordinary South Africans trying to find some kind of refuge. There have been reports of alleged racism on behalf of some, nationalists who are saying that, if you are, or trying somehow to segregate those who are of a darker pigment or those who are black, so as to say. What do we understand about that? Have you managed to even interact with some South Africans and get some kind of insight around what exactly their experience is?
No, I mean, I've interacted with some of the South African officials, but I haven't interacted with South Africans going over the border. I did personally see numbers of Africans coming over the border in the refugee places. So I didn't see any instances personally of that. That doesn't mean that doesn't exist, of course. But, what I've heard is that a lot of the refugees require consular assistance. And in instances, for example, where Zambians, there have been large numbers of Zambian students for instance, and a lot of the medical students in Ukraine, they required government assistance to be able to get back, and that went relatively smoothly, and they ended up in most of them, I think, in Poland. So, you know, there is a degree of governmental responsibility that has to be taken in terms of the organization. People arriving without papers is never going to be a good outcome to that. And as it is, even those people with papers, with real means of getting over the border, real permissions, they're waiting up to 60 hours and even longer to get over the border. So it's not because they happen to be African that they may be waiting 60 hours. It's just everybody is waiting a long time because the system is so congested, given the sheer volume of people. I think one of the things that's actually quite, I suppose, reassuring in some respects is how many Africans there are in Ukraine and who were doing university studies and engineering studies, scientific studies. You know, it just shows how integrated the world is today, and it often takes a crisis like this to remind us just how interdependent we have become. The flip side of that is, of course, then you have a conflict like this which undoes all of that. But I have been actually impressed by simply the volume of Africans who found their way out and who were, of course, working and living in Ukraine.
Yeah, Greg Mills, we'll leave it there for now, but thank you very much for your insights. Greg Mills is from the Brenthurst Foundation, just having an opportunity to spend about 2 weeks on that Ukrainian border there.